Good morning. Thank you for tuning in to You Are Your Brand, where I am your host, Felicia Shakespeare. It is exciting to always be here. Yet another Thursday morning, right here on the She Is Still Dope network, the first network created for purpose-driven women. So thank you so much for joining me. As always, I pray that you are doing well. I pray that you are once again taking all of the content in on the network as once again it has been designed and created just for you. So once again, please join me every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So what I want to do today is I want to just once again just continue to talk about some things that we've been kind of going over the last couple of weeks. And today I kind of feel more like in an inspirational space, because I really feel like we need to be inspired. I know a lot of people try to low-key inspiration, right? They try to say you can't really put a price tag on that, or can you really sell inspiration? But I think at the end of the day, only things that people are truly convicted of within themselves, within their purpose, within their calling, within their brand, will parlay over to you. So what I was thinking, as always, as I'm preparing my mind and my heart, I want to always be mindful, what should I be saying this week? What is going to make the best impact this week? So what I was thinking about is a direct correlation of our brand to our purpose. So what I want to talk about today, the topic is the path to purpose, the path to purpose. So many of us, and I hear this question all the time about what is purpose? What is purpose? There's so many definitions. Some people think of purpose as your why, and I was involved in just kind of a conversation this morning, early this morning, and I was just kind of hearing different aspects of what is defined as individuals' point of view of purpose. So one take of purpose could be, what is my why? What is the basis of why I'm doing what I'm doing? I hear that all the time. And I do agree with that. But when I begin to hear it today, it just kind of set another tone, because I think when we think of our why in terms of our personal why, that can always be different from our either professional or entrepreneurial why, right? But at the end of the day, it all comes back to, the foundation, right? But, when I think of my why, a lot of times, you hear people talk about their why being their family. They're doing what they're doing because they want to leave a legacy. They want to impact the world. They want to just do more, be more, and just whatever the case may be. And in other cases, I think of purpose too. When you think of your career, people think about climbing the career, the ladder, I just think about, at the time when I became a hired career professional. One thing that was always in my mind, and I always think back to it now, at first it was not my purpose. Now, this is really interesting. When we've been talking about purpose, what have we been talking about? Our identity, right? Your identity as in who you are, the basis, the core of the foundation. And when I was thinking back to that this morning, I was thinking back, at one point in time, identity for me was based on what I was able to do, what I was able to accomplish. And I think that's a lot of times how people go into their quote unquote definition of purpose, because they want to somehow tie in what they're able to accomplish as part of their why. But many times I found along the way, and especially serving God, that sometimes your why may not be what his will is, right? Your why may not be his will. And when I say that for a particular point in time, many times we can be on a path and we think we're doing everything we can do. When I think about my path as a young adult, just once again in my head, and I think it was just framed that way because of the way the world works. At the time, it was like, you grow up, you get a job, you make good money, whatever that looks like. You climb the ladder. I think the ladder meant your titles, were getting more fancy, along the way. And I thought back to even what was the turning point, even when I knew that I was on a path to purpose beyond just the position, beyond the position. So when I think back to the moment for me, particularly, I think back to a time where I was, on my way in the corporate sector. I had achieved every goal, and that's another thing. Sometimes we don't even stop to smell the roses because we're just on this path. So what is a path? Before I get too deep into this, a path is something that has to be what? It has to be forged. It has to be created. And many times on the path to purpose, you are on a path that has never been created, maybe for someone like you. I look at my career, and many times I was either the first or the only. And wherever you fill in the blank, I was either the first or the only. I was either the first person of color or the only person of color. I was the first woman or the only woman in these particular spaces, and when I look back at that now, I was literally on a path and I was forging a path, for the people that were coming behind me. But long and short, as I was thinking further today, as I said, when I was on this path for career growth in my mind, I began to see that, what, I've been able to do the things I wanted to do in this company. I've been able to climb the ladder in this company. I've been able to make the salary that I had set up, at least at the time, as a goal for in this company. I was able to travel, do work from home. It just seemed like the perfect opportunity. But it was something that I was missing, right? I was not fully fulfilled in this opportunity. And then I think back to how at that moment is when everything began to change. And I literally woke up one day and I literally had I think it was a dream that I would no longer be at this company anymore. And I'm just like, I shared the dream with someone, a beloved family member, and I'm just like, I don't think I'm going to be here this much longer. I didn't understand why, because it didn't make sense. Why I seemingly was doing everything right. I had finally overcome so many barriers and, different things. And I would even say stigmas, discriminatory issues, all of these things to get to this point. And now I finally made it, quote unquote, and it just felt like I wasn't fulfilled. So how many of y'all ever felt that way? After you've done all the things that you thought you were supposed to do in the mindset of what you envisioned to be success, once you got there, you realized there was more. There was still more. There was something missing. And I will never forget how the next day, after I had that thought that I just wasn't going to be there that much longer. I didn't know why. My job wasn't in jeopardy. I just didn't understand. But the next day I got a call, and the call was that they were downsizing the department. It wasn't that I wasn't doing my job. It was almost as if at that point in time in my career, I think it was my fourth position at this organization. I had just transferred to a new department. So you know how they always say the adage is last in, first out, specifically when it comes down to seniority. So it wasn't that I was doing anything wrong, but it was just every year the company always downsized. It was just a known fact that they would downsize and offer packages to people. So at that point, okay, I was just going to dive in my mind. Okay, let's just look for another position. I can go to another department. But God had a greater plan, right? It literally seemed as if every door was blocked. Every single door was blocked for me to move on to the next thing. And I'll never forget how it just stopped me in my tracks. And I was just like, okay, well, you should be like praying about this. Clearly, God has another plan for you if every door is not opening at this point. So you have to understand and discern, even on your path, what is happening in this moment. I didn't realize that everything was about to change. And like I was saying, it felt like everything had already been going great. I had been fulfilled and all of the things, but it was like God was just letting me know, you know what? No, this is not it for you. And I have something else I want you to do. And when I began to just kind of stop and put some prayer on it, and literally an epiphany came when I had a conversation with a trusted person in my life. And they just said one thing. And the thing was, didn't you always want to teach? And I'm like, I sure did. Ding, 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 ding. It was like the light bulb went on. And long and short, my whole career path pivoted. And when I made that change, when I made the pivot, everything began to fall in place. So I just want to talk about, once again, in more depth today, the path to purpose and how that truly impacts everything. So one thing I would say, at what point did things in my life begin to shift? When did it all begin to change? And then you know what I trace that all back to? And I want you to write that down. It all began with a decision. It all began with us, the decision. So what I want you to know is when I decided to move beyond my limitations, my self-doubt, my fears, my insecurity, and all of those things that we face as women and as human beings, that is when my path began to change and also lead me into another career in a new direction. And ultimately, everything is interconnected. So once again, what is our real purpose? Many of us are searching. People are searching specifically, vigorously for solutions. But guess what? One thing I realized in this process, and I want you to listen to me closely. The one thing I realized as I began to start to internalize the message and understanding of what purpose really meant. So what is real purpose identified? When I started to realize that I own the solutions all along. They weren't outside of myself. And many times, many of us are looking for answers that God is giving you if you would stop and take the time to listen. The reality of it is you have it in you right now. Everything that God created for you to utilize and for you to possess to get to the next part of your life and what you deem as the next phase of the shift, He has already put it inside of you. So this has been a reason why I think we as people, like everyone else, we don't interpret or process information as other individuals do. That is why we all bring a unique perspective to the world because of the mere fact that we are distinctly created. No individual holds the exact same set of ideas or the DNA as you do, right? You are unique. So if I could compare myself to billions of people in this world, it doesn't matter. God has given you something. But many times the mistake I know we make on this path is that we're looking either to a framework. And when I would say that, I would think of like once again, the position. I wanted my position to validate who I was. I was making my position my identity of me being a successful person or not a successful person. But how many of you all can agree that what we do is not necessarily all of encompassing of who we are? It does not fully encompass who we are as an individual. So when I decided that enough was enough, I began to move about my life with a sense of urgency, and just, intentionality to know that, what, I need to figure this out, Lord. And that's when everything began to unfold. And I will honestly say, I sincerely believe that God has brought each and every individual into this world for us to actually make an impact. So when we have motion, movement, so when we make the motions, when we make the movement, and guess what? Then meaning begins to collide and we start to see our purpose. So by making one decision at that time, one decision, I was propelled onto a trajectory of life that I did not know was possible. So that was just one part. So as I went on that path, once again, I began to see more and more of how me making that decision now, it changed everything. Once again, it put me in a whole new light, a whole new aspect of who I was supposed to impact, and just a whole different perspective. And then ultimately, it led me to want to help other people, And so when I say this, I meant by to say about the path to purpose is that once your mindset has changed, so when I say the path to purpose, what I'm really saying is once your mindset has changed about your situation and the decision is made to be who you were intended to be, somehow the entire direction of your life organically becomes altered and starts leaning in that direction. I'm a living witness that once you are on the path to purpose, once you are tuned in to the moment, because I do believe purpose is evolutionary. We don't always understand the seasons that we're in and why we're doing what we're doing at those times. But as we continue, what did I say? Motion and movement. We already know faith without what is what? if we don't move, if we don't actually act on the things that are in our control, to do everything in our power, to be very intentional, many times that's when we become stagnant. But when we do those things to stay on this path, it organically comes together. And who agrees with me? It organically has come together. You've seen different times. So that is why the enemy, and I would say what? The enemy in a me. I wrote about that. And I talked about that on my last podcast episode. Stop self-sabotage, right? Because many times the enemy is in a you, right? It's in a me. It's in us, in us. Because many times we just, once again, get off track for different reasons. So whether it's distractions through circumstances, and the circumstances could be a myriad of things. It could be personal. It could be something that's impacting you directly. It could be something impacting you indirectly, whether it be something happening with family, with friends, whatever the case may be, and even down to the little things. I found that a lot of times our enemy, not that other enemy, not the enemy in you, but the enemy of our soul, many times will try to not make the minor things major. I know for me, I could almost leap over walls and do things and just overcome major things. It's like, oh, that it just rolls off my back, right? But then when it comes down to the little things, it's like the enemy wants us to harp on the petty, the little things. But how many of y'all know, even that scripture that talks about it's the little foxes that destroy the vine. So it's never going to be always that big thing. You would think, if someone has overcome cancer and, all these traumatic things of life, how could they still be held hostage with something simple, like, maybe judging somebody or not forgiving somebody? I'll use that as an example. You've overcome, hypothetically, a major illness, but yet this one person did something to you that you can't let go. How crazy is that? You literally have your life. You literally survived the worst. And then that's what the enemy wants us to focus on, the minor things. But once again, when you're on the path to purpose, you have to be intentional about everything that's happening in your life, even down to the fact that you are not focused on the things that really just don't matter, right? So what are we talking about today? The path to purpose. So how you see your life will always be the first component to impact your viewpoint or your point of view. How you see your life will always be the first component to impact your viewpoint or point of view. What do I mean by that? Outcomes are experienced in your mind. Now, I want you to write this down. Outcomes are experienced in your mind well before they manifest around you. Outcomes are experienced up here well before they manifest around you. So whether that's the positive or the negative. So I'm a firm believer that before you will ever see it, you must see it. Before you will ever see it manifest, you must see it. So back to my point, of when the shift took place, that was just one aspect of purpose, right? Because purpose is evolutionary, right? Let's, just write that down as well. Purpose is not a one and done. A lot of times, and I think the mistake once again came, and when I say mistake, I would say more so the incorrect thinking, the mindset. Once again, that a career was going to create all of my successes. And if I climbed this ladder and if I made this salary, it was going to be all right. But that's not the reality. That's not how God created life. That's not how he made us to want to be fulfilled. And, once again, we have to desire the things that he's put in us and really understand that, guess what are the things, what are the things that I can identify as the gifts and as the talents and as the interests, and that was the thing. I never equated that what I was doing could be something I enjoy per se. I never looked at initially when I made the decision, for my degree, or when I made the decision to study the things that I studied and take the jobs that I took. It wasn't necessarily, am I going to really enjoy this? It was just looking at my skill set. Could I do it? Not was I intended to do it, but could I do it? Was I trained to do it? And then you went off to do it, and you did good, and we did good in it, but it wasn't fulfilling. So when I made my decision, that I was going to enter a whole new industry, a whole new sector, and it didn't make sense as far as the time I had put in. But when purpose calls, you have to make the necessary moves. So I will go ahead and just once again fast forward to once again identity. We talked about that. We've already talked about that as part of being your brand and understanding who you are. I think a big part of identity, once again, we have to make sure we're not correlated with the things that we're just doing per se, that we're trained to do or that people want us to do. But what are the things that God has identified in you, that he's given you, what has he put on your heart to do that don't even make sense, to other people? Some people don't even understand why you are doing some of the things that you are doing at this season in your life. You know why? Because they're not on your path. We're talking about today what? The path to purpose. You are on a path. You are forging a way. You are leading the pack, so to speak. And many times when God has us on the path, it doesn't seem familiar, right? It doesn't seem like other people understand why we're doing what we're doing, or that it's the popular way, right? Many times it's not going to be popular. And when I think about that, just even in general, when you think about prominent business figures who started with nothing and created something, who is it I think about? I even think about the creator of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. I think about Bill Gates. Once again, history told us these gentlemen ultimately what they were working on something in the technological ecosystem, right? They began to just put their thoughts, their interests, and they begin to act on those things. And then ultimately what? It has led them to this point. I know they could not have imagined the level of influence, the level, of impact, that once again, when I think of Facebook, when you think of Mark Zuckerberg, just wanting to have a way for Ivy League college students to get together, on the weekends, virtually, have all these groups in these rooms, that was the birth of Facebook, right? And then, of course, now it's the phenomenon. Of course, Microsoft, we already know it has set the standard. When you think of someone like Oprah, once again, this young girl, who had all the odds against her, when we look at her story of abuse and we look at her story of just being raised by a single parent, all of what, would consider the odds against, turned out to be something, that she used in her favor, that she did not let stop her to achieve and become what? The leading talk show host in the world, a philanthropist, a producer, and ultimately now a network owner. So guess what? Her rise to the power shows how the power of being intentional and clear about your purpose can take you everywhere. So I just want to say, even with us as people of faith, and if you're not a person of faith, I know you believe, this network is not, this network welcomes everyone. I just want to clarify that. That's what I love about it. You are all welcome here. Everyone's welcome here. I don't care what your faith is. But of course, just because we are welcoming all faiths, it doesn't mean that I can't declare what my faith is. And I just think that, we all have to respect everybody's faith and level of belief and how they believe and think. But long and short, I was just thinking about, once again, back to the aspect of making those moves and once again, on a path where you don't always know what the outcome is going to be. So I'm encouraging you today. What am I encouraging you to do today? I'm encouraging you to, once again, forge your path. Understand that, guess what? There is a path to purpose that may not be linked to what you've already been doing. Maybe there's something God is putting on your heart to do that absolutely makes no sense to anyone. Maybe it's something that you're going to have to do that, guess what? No one's going to be able to hold your hand to walk through it. It seems so hard, so difficult or so isolating, Sometimes path, purpose can seem isolating to people, and I was talking with a friend yesterday, and based on the work that she's doing, I'm like, wow, this is glamorous. It just seems to be so, amazing. And we were just sharing, how God works and how, there's just certain things she can't do, even though these opportunities are presented to her on a consistent basis. It's like she said, he just told her, this is not the vision I have for you. You have a vision. This is your vision, but I have a bigger vision. You know what? He always has a bigger purpose for us, right? He always has a way so much higher. That's why he talks about his ways are so much higher than ours. His thoughts are so much greater than ours. Because what he has for us to do, we can't even see the level of impact. Well, we see the stages. So once again, I didn't know that, me making this pivot over to a whole new career would then now put it in my heart deeply to want to share my story, share it in written form. Because I knew I had one of my gifts and talents. I love writing, but I didn't think that, me sharing my gifts and talents to write and to speak, would lead me to a path where now I'm sharing all of these truths, with women. And then ultimately, how awesome is God? Back to my point of inspiration, we can't lowball inspiration, because when we have a purpose and when we're in our purpose, what do we exude? We exude a passion, a level of life, a level of excitement. You can't tell me that you're in your purpose and you're humdrum about it. So as I began to get on this path, I said, you know what? Ultimately, there is so much more to life than just this job. It's so much more than just this career. You know what? I actually have a purpose that's beyond what my titles are and the company I work for. And even as an entrepreneur, it's so much more than that. People want to say they want to be an entrepreneur, but when it's time to get down to it, it's so much more involved. That's a whole nother show, right? But the work that's involved to actually have a credible business, first of all, credibility, integrity, then what? Profitability, to get it to on a where it has a return on the investment, because you're going to invest way more as an entrepreneur than you could ever imagine. So a lot of people, you got to know what's right for you. There's no right or wrong as far as God has you in the marketplace to work and be a light and be the best that you can be, the best version of your brand in those spaces. Wonderful. You have to figure that out on your path. If he's pulling you out of that, and now all of those experiences have now created the path to entrepreneurship. Only you can figure out if that's your path. So once again, the path to purpose is evolutionary. It's always evolving. But back to the point, would have never thought that I would literally be able to go to, it had already been said it was possible. I could see what's possible, but guess what? I didn't see how it was going to happen. So that's the biggest thing about, I think, even us as purpose-driven women. A lot of times we want to know, how is all this going to play out? We want the end result, especially the type A personalities, right? We want to know. We don't want to be in the dark. We want to be in control. And ultimately, guess what? When you turn over your life to what God is giving you and the ideas, you're not going to always know what's on the other side. What do you have to do? You have to be in motion, have that movement. And guess what? It will all come together step by step, chapter by chapter. Even when you think of a book, you don't come with the first chapter and then you write the ending. There's a series of chapters from the introduction to the ending, right? Our life is just like that. There are many chapters that are being written and that have been written. But the key is, have you tuned in enough to move on to the next chapter? Have you learned the lessons? Have you saw the signs? And once again, the epiphany of knowing, I got to make a whole pivot here. I got to do something totally different than I planned. When it got that training, and guess what? From that point, another pivot, something now totally different. You got to walk on water, Felicia. You got to have faith. You got to believe because you're on a path to purpose. So it is evolutionary. It's ongoing, but just do the best in the chapter that you're in. What I encourage you to do today is just stop and think, okay, what am I doing at this time? Where am I on the path to purpose? Am I being intentional about what God has already showed me? And I, a lot of times, I think this old term, I can't think of it right now, I hope I don't say it wrong, but this old saying talks about being thankful makes room for more. I think that's what we say. But long and short, I just believe, being faithful over what's few makes room for more, right? If you can't manage the space that you're in effectively, consistently, how will you move on to the next chapter? So I'm even asking myself, even today, I'm going to get off here and I'm going to take a full assessment of where I am at. We have to do that on a daily basis. We have to be consistent about it and even intentional about it. Because why? God has given us one life. We're living it right now. And I always say this as I get ready to close. Why do people think that they have all the time in the world? I don't understand. And even myself, I didn't realize how much time I was thinking about, in my younger years, in my career, in the beginning of my career. I was doing so much work trying to make it up this ladder, trying to do this. And thank the Lord, he stopped me and put me on a path. You know what, Felicia, it's more to you than this job. It's more to what I want you to do. I don't want you to just exist. I want you to have impact. And I would say that to you today. What are you doing to have impact? God don't want us to just exist. I truly believe whatever he's giving us to do ultimately is going to bring impact to somebody's life. It's going to bring hope. It's going to bring inspiration. It's going to bring revelation. Everything we do, I really believe, is setting us up to help someone else. So even all of what I did before, don't get me wrong, it was not anything wasted. Everything had to be learned. Every lesson had to be taken in. I had to go that route because that was just where I was. You can't go further than where your mindset is, but because I was always that person, and because you're that person, because you wouldn't be here today if you weren't that person. You're that person, right? That wants more, that sees more, that has a desire to do more. Although your circumstance might be saying something else, although you may feel like, for lack of a better term, the kitchen sink has been thrown at you. The kitchen sink of life, on every hand. We're not out here not having trouble and not having, we've talked about that a little bit at different times as I've been on this show. It's not that it's a given to just show up. We have to be intentional about showing up and not just showing up how we show up. That's why this show is so important. You are your brand. How you show up on the path that God has given you. How you show up on the path that God has given you is so critical. So as I close out today, I'm hoping you all can see me because it looks like I'm having a little technical thing here. All right, there we go. So as I close out today, I want you to just, once again, think about the path to purpose. What is purpose? Once again, how are you defining it? What is your why? What is the thing that God has put inside of you? Once again, what path, what mindset are you feeding on a daily basis? How are you approaching everything in your life? That is your assignment. That is your assignment. Figuring out, how intentional am I being, to do the things and be what God has called me to be at this time. So once again, thank you for once again joining me for this episode of You Are Your Brand. We just wanted to take a little different twist today because guess what? You can't be a brand if you don't know your purpose. You won't know your brand. I think that's one of my main quotes in my book. You can't know your brand if you don't know your purpose. So how do you know your purpose? Once again, you have to be on a path to it. It's a path. It's an ongoing situation where you are able to, once again, internalize what is real purpose, identify too. Like I said, for me, real purpose is identified when one becomes eternally free. If I could give my own personal definition, it wasn't just about my why, but it's about me being free, but free enough to understand that there is more that God has for my life. And guess what? I want to encourage you as we close out that there's more for you. So once again, thank you for tuning in. Please continue to follow me on Instagram, all social media platforms at Felicia Shakespeare. And I want to encourage you today, if you haven't, there is a book that I haven't talked a lot about. But if this is resonating with you today, the aspect of purpose, and you want to be more clear on your purpose, I did write it was a project that I actually curated called A Purpose-Driven Woman, 14 Memoirs on Becoming Fearless and Intentional. So go on Amazon today and look for that project, A Purpose-Driven Woman, 14 Memoirs on Becoming Fearless and Intentional. Also, you can find that on apurposedrivenwoman.us. But once again, to follow me, continue to go to at Felicia Shakespeare. And once again, we have so many exciting things in the works. Some announcements are coming soon, but we want you to, once again, make sure you're on the path. Make sure that you are a good steward, that's what I would say, over where you are right now. You will get there if you are a good steward and continue on the path to purpose one day at a time. Until next week at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, 8 a.m. Eastern, I'll see you then. Have a blessed rest of the day.